There's obviously a dollar difference between a $10 donation and a $10,000 donation, but there isn't actually an emotional difference between those two. It's just a means difference. That's why it's then important, I think, for us to get to talk to everybody involved, because everyone is giving in a way that they can.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and our goal with each episode is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from the nonprofit sector. Let's get started. Hello, NPFX listeners. I'm Russ Vanoff, and today we have another episode in our interview series on donor stewardship. If you missed that first episode in this series, you should definitely check it out. In it, Sami Zoss interviewed Janan Berberovic, Chief Philanthropy Officer at Avera Health. Janan shared some great advice on how to make stewardship feel much more personal, even in a large organization like Avera. Today, we'll be presenting Sami's interview with Mikey Latner, the Executive Director of Project Camp, a scrappy nonprofit that helps kids and families in the immediate aftermath of disasters across the U.S. Unfortunately, Sami can't be here with me today to analyze this interview because she's working with clients this week. So stepping in to pinch hit for her is our very own producer, Curtis Schmidt. Welcome, Curtis.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Thank you, Russ, for that warm welcome. Yes, I will be playing the part of Sami today. And can I just say,
sure,
it is quite cozy behind the curtain.
Right.
I'm very impressed with you. Every episode being out front, it's impressive.
Well, thanks, Curtis. And you are very impressive, always behind the scenes. And it's great to have you out front with me today. And with that, let's set the stage for listeners. Why did Sami choose Mikey for this interview?
Yeah, when Sami and I first started planning this series, the first two people that immediately came to her mind were Janan and Mikey. And now that I've heard both interviews, I think that together they make a really good case that you can do stewardship well, no matter the size of your organization. Avera has all of these resources to really bake stewardship into the organization. You know, it's systematized. Project Camp, on the other hand, is much smaller, scrappy, as you put it. But Mikey lives and breathes stewardship as a person, as you'll hear in the interview. And I think in both cases, they make the experience of supporting their organizations feel really good to their donors.
Okay, cool. Great. Well, let's jump into it. Is there anything specific in the interview that you'd like our audience to listen for?
Yes, I thought it was really interesting how Project Camp responded to the outpouring of support they received during the LA fires in January. Longtime listeners of the podcast probably know that you, Russ, are a huge proponent of having a donor-centric rapid response strategy. And I think that's exactly what Mikey describes. They had systems in place so that when the support came in, they could channel it where it needed to go. And they could do it in a way that continued to deliver that positive donor experience for their supporters. So I think it's not only a great example of donor stewardship, I think it's a great case study for the benefits of having a rapid response strategy.
Excellent. I'd love to hear that. And great. So let's play Sami's interview with Mikey Latner. And then for everybody listening, Curtis and I will be back after the interview to talk more and share a few takeaways. Here we go.
All right, Mikey, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Mikey, I invited you here because I've worked with you and your organization, Project Camp, for a little bit now. And I've continually told you how inspired I am by how intuitive your entire organization has been with how you guys treat donors from a stewardship perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I do want to get into it, but I would love for you to give us like the quick overview of like what Project Camp is, maybe why people would have heard of you in the last few months, anything that can sort of set the scene for us.
So Project Camp, our mission is to provide care for children and by extension, relief for families and resilience for communities impacted by disaster. We do that by popping up free trauma-informed day camp when disasters strike and they close schools, they close after-school care or summer camps. And so in order to help kids have a unique space to be kids and to process what's happening around them and to provide that support mechanism for parents to go back to work, to navigate emergency services and insurance claims and all that kind of stuff, and to process themselves, we provide what we believe is a critical resource, childcare. We're not mental health professionals. We have mental health professionals on our team. We often have them at our camps, but camp itself it's not therapy. We use play as a therapeutic device. We tweak the dials that are inherently healing and therapeutic that make camp this safe, warm, welcoming, like I said, intentionally healing and therapeutic space. So we bring in youth professionals, so teachers, after-school care professionals, camp professionals to provide that space, people who know how to work very well with kids to build that space. And when necessary, we connect kids and families to local mental health resources for longer term things like therapy.
Awesome. No, I've watched you guys, especially over the LA fires, which I'm sure we'll get into in some of your stories, but I really watched what activation looks like for Project Camp when the fires hit the LA community. And that was when I think I learned the most about what you guys do and how you do it. So before we get into that, I want you to take us back a year ago today. So what does stewardship look like for your organization? Tell us how big your organization is. So how many people are working on fundraising, stewardship, and just like, how are you taking care of your donors?
Yeah. So a year ago, we're a full-time team of 6. We had a part-time fundraiser who I believe left right before then. And we always have a smattering of either part-time or contract staff that are helping us with certain select areas. So like every June through October, we staff up a couple of seasonal camp directors and a slew of what we call on-call camp directors so that we have essentially surge capacity to be ready when disasters strike. So we constantly are, to use a sports analogy, like we're in the huddle when the whistle blows, or when the ball is snapped. And so stewardship for us really is, because it's a small team, it's very intimate. This is something I take from my first boss, actually, who was very adamant about writing handwritten thank you notes. And her perspective on it, which has still really stuck with me, is that like once you move even if you're handwriting the same message to each person that you're sending it to, taking the time to recognize the name, to recognize the person, the fact that someone decided to get, not just to donate money to the organization, but is impacted by the work that you're doing so much so that they took a step themselves. It means that like being able to take the time yourself to write the handwritten note is a meaningful acknowledgement of that. And so as a really small team, we often will break that group up. I primarily do that kind of outreach work, either calling or writing the thank you notes to donors. So a lot of it lives on my plate. But yeah, every person, every entity that invests in our work, that supports this work, we want to take the chances to say a meaningful thank you.
That's awesome. I've actually received them, right? Like I work with Project Camp, and it doesn't matter, every time I give or I do a little extra for them or something, like I'm getting one of those in the mail. And it's like my favorite mail to get. Mm-hmm. I get a postcard that's got kiddos on it, and I get to see that impact. And so I think what listeners probably aren't catching in that answer, Mikey, is I think the one I have has kids with like weird face makeup on and someone like throwing a ball, or like just like the goofiness of being a kid, and to think that you can capture that essence amid something so tragic like a tornado or a hurricane or a wildfire, I think is just what the magic kind of is.
Yeah, that is, so if you look at our Instagram account, you're not going to see, if you had no context, you wouldn't think that Project Camp is a disaster relief organization. And it is true. Like when we have journalists come to camp, or when we have people get to like walk through camp in real time, that is their exclamation. It's like, oh, it's summer camp. I'm like, yes, that's the point. The issue is not, we didn't invent day camp, right? It's about activating this tool that we already know works for kids as quickly as possible at a time where they need it most. And so the photos or the videos of kids smiling and making friends and being outside, it's It's made them more meaningful by the fact that you understand that these kids have evacuated their homes from a wildfire or they've lost their homes because of a hurricane. When you understand the background context, that's what makes the fact that they're able to do that work for themselves and to use play for themselves as a way to process all that more meaningful.
That's awesome. So we fast forward past sort of like that summer disaster season. So it's kind of about when we'd started working together a little bit more. And that was when I realized this guy's got an understanding of stewardship. He may not know that's what it is. He may not understand that it is different than the average executive director of a 6-person nonprofit program delivery shop. But what can we do to sort of compound on this? And I know one of our first tasks together was, how do we work with our board to show them how to be part of not only the fundraising process, which we did do, but also the stewardship beyond that. And I think we had some fun with that Giving Tuesday campaign. And I'd love for you to kind of tell our listeners just what it was like, not only to have your board activating on fundraising, but moreover, and you were really good about, hey, I want my board to know how to tell our story and to encourage people to be part of it, whether that is to thank them, whether that is to volunteer, tell people to call us if there's a disaster, that kind of thing. So I'm going to kind of give you the floor to talk a little bit about what that Giving Tuesday campaign really did for you from that perspective.
Yeah, there's a couple layers to that too, because part of it is, I think, you will correct me on this. So I'll start by saying it and know that that's coming. But I'm not a trained fundraiser, right? This is the first organization I've started. This is the first time that I've been in a role to really tell our story and to raise the money to be able to make sure that we can to fulfill our mission. And I think I think I still do, have a lot of second guessing or self-doubt that comes with that. And I think where I've been able to move through that has been from seeing the impact of telling the story from my own perspective land. And I think that's where that was the most meaningful way to train our board to do the same thing. Our board members we're still in the friends and friends of friends category of building the board up. And so there isn't people aren't on the board who are big check writers, or they're not major connected government or corporate or CSR affiliated folks. We just don't have those networks. But they're animated by the work that we do through the work that they do. They're personally passionate. And so being able to share why they view the importance of the work with the people around them has led to the connections that have actually done that work to elevate our mission, to get us in front of the right people, to raise funds. And I think I walked into this thinking there was a very linear, you make the connection, you have a couple of meetings, there's a pipeline, someone writes a check, they keep writing checks. And it's actually never worked that way for us. So I don't even have something to compare it to. But I think it's, a good example is our board chair is an emergency manager by training. She used to work at Disney and now works for a private firm, but she is just well connected in the emergency management field. And that's something that's been helpful for us in connecting to and learning from local, state, and federal emergency management. But it's also meant that the connections to corporate emergency management or corporate philanthropy have come from activation around, or animation, I would say, around personal animation around the work that we do. And so our board isn't cracking doors open at major banks and leading to these 7-figure checks, right? And it's not how the work that we do, but we're able to tell a story of the first couple of concentric circles around us in a way that's directly connected to them. And that lands with people. And so the fact that all of our board members have been to our camps, the fact that our board members have experience with camp in their own lives, the fact that a lot of our board members have kids, they're starting to speak, they're able to speak about the work in a way that they know impacts the families and comes from having those direct relationships with the families.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if there was just a nice little formula that we could follow and it was you do this, this, and this, and then they will just give you money forever. Yeah. And if you find that, please let us know, let our listeners know, and the world's problems will be solved. But you touch on it so well that, what it felt like was you were activating your board for fundraising, but in actuality, what you were doing was, and I love animation versus activation. That is such a great way to describe it, because you weren't just activating them to hey, help us raise money. Mm-hmm. You were saying, help us show the world how awesome this is, because you have dedicated your time. So you're showing them like, we see your time as this important. We see your dedication to what you're doing to us as this important. Like, we want you to tell the world why you do it so we can get more people to do that with you. And the other thing that I really did want to say, the imposter syndrome is not just you. I will 100% call you out every time because you're a great fundraiser.
I appreciate that.
Like, you've gotten me to donate way more than I would have thought I was going to give. I know I tease you a lot about it because you do say that you're not a fundraiser or you're not good at fundraising or whatever. But I think it's important to note that like there are so many people that live in those shoes with you and they don't have someone like me saying like, hold up, you're much better at this than you think. Like, let's talk about it. And so if anybody needs that, just clip this little audio. You heard it and just play it on repeat. Feel free. But I love your story about activating your board and how you showed them the impact there, because then what listeners might not know is from there, we hit January. And what's extra crazy is you were supposed to be off. Like, you had life stuff happening. And then all of a sudden, literally your world caught fire. But then what listeners are going to find is your donors, what was it? They tripled. I think we tripled the donor database in that month. And while that's awesome, that also poses a whole new set of issues on how do you make sure you steward to the level that you had set as the standard for Project Camp with less staff, because you had even less staff than the 6 that you had last year.
It was a wild time. For context, I think it's also important to note that like some of the best early advice I got was actually from my wife, who like she was the one who was like from the beginning, like, don't try to craft business plan or polished version of something you haven't done yet. Just start and you will figure out all of the other pieces along the way. And I think something that is like has helped deal with a sense of imposter syndrome, has helped us navigate when we don't know the answer or don't have the thing, is that level of honesty. Like, it's good. I got good public speaking advice years ago that was like, an audience can, no matter how good you are, they can always spot a bullshitter. If you are honest with the audience, no matter how good or bad you are, that people see and that people gravitate towards. And so when it comes down to like, do we have all of the metrics in place to share something, or do we have like the polished PDF version of this, that, or the other to share with the donor? Like, we try to put these things together, and oftentimes it's not all together. But if we're able to talk from an honest place about what we do, why it's important, and where we need help, that always lands. It doesn't always mean that every person we talk to writes a check, but everyone gets it. It's not for everyone, but everyone gets it. And I think that's the thing that's feedback we do often get, is that like people very quickly understand what the need is and why it's important. And so I think we really benefited from spending years doing work and building relationships ahead of time, knowing that this was a moment where we had the relationships and the connections to open up. We ended up opening 10 camps across 9 sites, both in Los Angeles, East and West LA, and then also in Santa Barbara. And so it was a good reflection of, we'd built the trust with the entities that within the community that could then turn around to their constituents and say, we're going to do this with you. We're going to do this with this organization. You can trust us with your kids. And that's actually the only way camp does work, because we're such a tiny team. The only way we can actually run camp is with dedicated, qualified local volunteers. It's also true that we can't do any of this work without a trusted voice and trust from parents. It's a thing about summer camp. Like, if you don't have trust in parents, they don't bring their kids to camp. If you don't have kids at camp, you don't have camp.
Hi, this is Curtis Schmidt, producer of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you're a nonprofit professional who has questions about your program, or maybe you feel like you've taken your advocacy, fundraising, or membership effort as far as you can and you need some fresh ideas, then we have a special offer for you today. NPFX podcast listeners can get a free 30-minute consultation with IPM Advancement, no strings attached, when you go to ipmadvancement.com/free. Just enter a few details and an IPM team member will contact you to follow up. It's that easy. That website again is ipmadvancement.com/free. Thanks for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Now let's return to the episode.
So I would love if you could kind of talk us through what that process was and maybe what you learned from it as far as stewarding sort of from a mass perspective, because it was a huge influx. Like we said, you tripled your donor database, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're talking about also the span of like that happened in maybe 2.5 weeks, which is like, it also, I think, lends itself to acknowledging that we had a system that could track that information in real time. Because like even knowing that information was important to just understand like the scope of what we were doing. So another number I can share is I think we had about 650 people sign up to volunteer, a little under 100 that we actually deployed to camp, close to 200 that we background check vetted and had done training for. But what we then saw was, and it connects to the outpouring of donors as well. What we saw with all of that is people wanting to get involved. And so we started to think about all of that as like people now see who we are and the work that we do, and they're finding ways to get involved. And it was part of an early premise that we had about our work, is that the people that we're calling on to volunteer, like I said, trained, qualified childcare professionals, not normally the people you think about deploying to a disaster. Like I'm a perfect example of that. Like I'm a camp director by training. And so in a wildfire, I'm not the person that you would send to the fire line to fight the fire, is maybe the best way of saying that. But in every community, there are people like me who run after school programs or day camp, day residential camp, or teachers. And all of these folks have a passion for working with kids, a skill set for working with kids, and can do so if provided the right pathway to get involved, to be able to be of support to kids in the community. And so we really looked at ourselves as creating a pathway for people to get involved. And so we started to think about how can we view the donors that popped up and the parents that brought their kids to camp and all the volunteers who got to work at camp and all the people who volunteered to work that we didn't even get to, as the same pool of people, as people animated by the work who want to get involved. And so then it's about how do you continue to animate them around the work that we're doing? How do you acknowledge I'm going to use the word donation, but the donation that people are making, and donation in dollars, donation in time, donation even just be like, it takes like a certain amount of gumption to say, like, I see this thing, like, I'm actually going to sign up for it. And even if I don't do it, or like maybe what goes more generationally appropriate, like even if I do it and I decide to bail on it, I think there's something important about people answering a call when it happens and using that moment to say, like, yeah, this is super important. We really appreciate that you did this. We want to be able to tell you more about it, and we want to be able to call upon you again. I feel like for us, it was like we wanted to hug people closer with all of this. And so getting to call all the volunteers back, getting to write thank you notes to people, being able to do all this acknowledgement really was a way of like establishing that, I think, that meaningful connection. And so it was like simple to think about it as like you write a thank you note to say thank you, but it was that we were actually trying to, on maybe a step back level, or like a more meta level, we're trying to like acknowledge, like, thank you for seeing us and seeing this work. And that also animates them to tell other people about it. Like that gives people the direction to say, like, this is something that my values, or my ethics, like, pushed me to do. And on some level, I was rewarded for it. And why would we not want to incentivize that? And why would I not want to share that with others?
That's awesome. And what you're not sharing in that story that I know of is you activated your board in that, right? So you've spent a lot of time showing them how to help spread that message, but then you truly, like, there was a list and you were like, hey, I need you guys to help me call these people and just say thank you. And here's the impact they had on our organization. And it shows. And I love that you're like, we just wanted to hug them a little closer, bring them in a little closer. I think that's a great way to show it, because you showed that in this moment, even if we didn't use your time, or even if it was a quote small donation, which so many people feel like aren't worth the call or the note, they feel like my dedication, my donation in whatever form it was, made a difference. And clearly this organization cares about every aspect of its community, not just the kiddos, right?
Yeah. A shout out that I will give to Lisa Greer, my mother-in-law, that helped us think about hugging these people closer, was something that she talks about with monthly donors. Mm-hmm. So she talks about not just acknowledging when someone becomes a monthly donor, that they're making that like sustained commitment to you, but when they stop, and noticing that and reaching out, and not to try to convince them to stay, but to see why. Like, did something happen, or if they decided to go to use their money a different way, or if they had a change in job or like a change in finances, but to acknowledge and notice that, because it's important. I think what I take from that is like, it's important that you see people. And so that's the difference between, there's obviously a dollar difference between a $10 donation and a $10,000 donation, but there isn't actually an emotional difference between those two. It's just a means difference. And so I think that's why it's then important, I think, for us to get to talk to everybody involved, because everyone is giving in a way that they can. And they're giving as much as they can when they can. And I think that's when you start to delineate what you do as a way of acknowledging donors, and you lose a personal element of that just because of the dollar amount, I think I get its efficiency, but you're losing a personal piece that I think that people notice.
Awesome. Mikey, before we hop off here, if someone, like if a nonprofit similar to you all, size-wise, wanted to deepen their stewardship, what's one step they could take? What would you tell them?
I think it's generationally appropriate, but I actually would say don't be afraid of the phone call.
Ooh.
Like, I call donors all the time, and 9.5 out of 10 times I leave a voicemail. Like, people just don't pick up numbers they don't know. Like, I do the same thing. It isn't necessary that we need to be in a conversation, but I want to be able to share a thank you. And also, I think when you call and just to say thank you to someone, and you're not expecting anything else, you're not trying to get them to re-up or try to like extend their donation. We do this at the end of every year with all of our staff and our board. We call every donor. And it's something I take from my wife's organization. They shut down for a day and they do all of this because it's not something people expect, but it is like a personal note. It's another moment of like human to human interaction. So like, I may live to regret this, but like, I don't think a robot can do what we do. I think that there certainly are technological tools that would take over the acknowledgement for us, that I could like 1, 2, 3 click and it could be done. And we have some of them. Like, our database sends a thank you letter that is, that you can use for your tax deductible, for your taxes at the end of the year, right? That's just sort of a functional component. But I think if you're outsourcing the human to human connection point, you are really losing something. And for us, in doing work that is so connected to relationships, it's important that that's also part of who we are and how we do what we do. So yeah, I sometimes it's uncomfortable, but and sometimes the calls are like, they kind of end odd because it's like, well, I just wanted to say thank you and hear a little bit about you and have a great day. But I think they, like I said, sort of earlier on, like, I think what sometimes comes off as like off the cuff actually is received as genuine.
I love that. Pick up the phone and make the thank you.
It's so easy to call someone.
One thing I'd like to let you do is let everybody know where they can find more information about Project Camp and you.
Definitely, yeah. So can always come visit us, projectcamp.co. And then also our Instagram is actually probably the best way to get to find us at Project Camp LA.
All right. Thanks so much, Mikey. And that is a wrap.
Wow, what a great interview. Donor stewardship obviously is just such an integral part of an organization's ability to have a successful fundraising program. And the way that Mikey integrates stewardship with the experience that he delivers to donors is just a great model for smaller organizations.
Yeah.
And I just want to call out Mikey and his team and the board and all that they do, because it's such an incredible resource for families and communities affected by disasters. So shout out to Project Camp. Their link is in the show notes. And if you haven't heard of them, I encourage you to learn more about Project Camp and what they're doing, and just some fantastic down-to-earth advice from Mikey. Get on the phone, make those personal connections with donors. And even if it's as simple as, you call someone and you get their voicemail, just be human about it. Leave a nice message for someone. Just thank them for being involved and for giving you the resources and giving your organization the resources to fulfill your mission. That's just some great advice. Like, don't put up walls for yourself. Make it easy, make it human, make it simple, and don't stress yourself out about connecting with donors. Just realize that these people are supporting you because they love what you do. They love what you do for other people. Keep it human, keep it one-on-one, and just thank them for what they're doing. I just love that.
Great. You want me to go next?
Yeah.
So I picked out two points that basically I think could be missed that really kind of jumped out at me. So the first was when he was talking about handwriting thank you notes. We talk a lot about how stewardship is meaningful to the donor. And a handwritten thank you note does actually satisfy that.
Sure.
A donor receives it and they realize somebody took the time to write this out, and it's meaningful in that way. Yeah. And I think one of the things that he mentions, and it goes by quickly, is that it's also meaningful to the fundraiser or the executive director or the board member or whoever's writing that note. Yeah. There's a benefit to stewardship to the people within the nonprofit. Not just the donor or the organization's bottom line. So when you handwrite a note, what it does, because it takes time and it takes a little extra effort, is it provides this opportunity for you to really consider the donor's thoughtfulness and how much they care about your mission. So I think what he's saying is let yourself feel how special a thing that is.
Yeah.
You know, that's a part of this stewardship conversation that I don't hear talked about much, and that's why I wanted to highlight it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that goes to the involvement of folks who aren't staff, your board members, the people who you're able to engage in the stewardship process that aren't receiving a paycheck. If you're able to get board members involved, and maybe you have those board members who are a little anxious about making a hard ask to folks and getting involved in the fundraising process. If you can get them involved in the stewardship process, remember that is part of the moves management cycle. We need folks involved in that moves management cycle at the stewardship level. So even if they're not able to make a hard ask, get them involved in stewardship. It's an incredibly rewarding thing to be involved in some part of that moves management cycle and make that a meaningful experience for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second thing that I wanted to highlight was when he's talking about how he doesn't think of himself as a fundraiser.
Yeah.
And Sami, of course, jumps in and says, "You're a great fundraiser."
Right.
That, to me, got me thinking, like, what is a fundraiser?
Yeah.
And I'm going to attempt to answer that question.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
So I think at its most basic, a fundraiser is simply a person who can connect an organization's mission to a donor's desire to make a difference and turn that into a relationship. And I think we see that Mikey does that incredibly well. And in fact, he talks about how he gets his board to do that. And he uses this word animation.
Yeah.
So he activates his board through animation. And I think that what he's getting at is if you're well-versed in your mission, and he mentions that the board members have all been to camp. So I think that's great. They've actually participated.
Yeah.
So if you're well-versed in your mission and you believe in it, fundraising can be the most natural thing in the world.
Right.
And I think that was something that, is great, for listeners, anybody who's out there thinking, imposter syndrome or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that is great advice, is just, get animated about what your organization does. If you need to help other people be fundraisers like your board, get them animated first. And then you activate them and you say, here, call this donor or write this letter or whatever. So I think that's a great way in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very astute philosophical observation, right? We get hung up as fundraisers, and especially new fundraisers, people who are new to this industry, who might just be coming into it. We get hung up as new fundraisers on the mechanics of it, and we get very stressed out about making the ask. Like I remember when I first started out in fundraising about more than 25 years ago, I went to a AFP conference, and I think the title of the conference was Making the Ask. Right. And it was all about preparing you to make the ask. And it was so stressful for everybody to really have the entire thing revolve around making the ask. And now that I look back on it, it's all about being passionate about what you're fundraising for. And that's why we have a lot of podcasts that talk about passion. And I say it quite often, like if you're at an organization and you're fundraising for something you're not passionate about, go find another job.
Yeah.
Because you're going to hate your job. You're not going to be a good fundraiser. You're not going to do a good job for the organization. And it's going to be a drag showing up for work every day. You have to find something you're passionate about.
Yep.
You know, you can tough it out, but you're not doing anybody any favors, including yourself.
Yeah.
You got to find something that you love to do.
And everybody knows this is true. You know, if I see a movie and I love the movie and I'm like, oh my God, this is totally the kind of movie that Russ would love.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, go see this movie.
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah, so you evangelize it.
Yeah, it's that same idea. It's just like you said, it gets all twisted up in making the ask and learning about like how to do sales and all that stuff. It's just, it's more complicated than it needs to be.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I'd like to throw out there to wrap this conversation up. And this is a conversation that I think we want to bring Sami back for because I do know she's passionate about this. Speaking of passion, and it is this question of how to bring technology into the stewardship process. And I think this would be a great conversation for our next episode on stewardship. And I invite listeners, if you have some thoughts on that, if you have any thoughts on what we covered in these last two conversations, drop us a line. Tell us what you think. What are your experiences with stewardship? What have they been like? What have you seen lately? What's happening in your world with stewardship? Reach out to us. Let us know what your experience has been. And we'd love to have you on the show. So with that, we are going to wrap up this episode in our interview series on donor stewardship. I want to thank our producer, Curtis Schmidt, for joining me today. Thank you, Curtis.
Thanks for letting me step out here and actually speak.
It was awesome. Great. And thank you, Sami Zoss and Mikey Latner from Project Camp. Again, Mikey's information and Project Camp's link is in our show notes. Thank you, listeners, for tuning into another episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, and we'll see you on the next one.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. Thanks to our panel for sharing their insights and expertise. If you'd like to learn more about our panel members or any of the organizations or resources featured in this episode, we will include links in the show notes. If you like this podcast, we would love your help spreading the word. First, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward the episodes you like to friends and colleagues or share them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help us reach more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners decide whether or not to try out a new podcast. We appreciate your help. For suggestions on topics, guests, or nonprofit organizations you'd like to hear on the podcast, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. For back episodes and more resources like white papers, infographics, and blog articles, please visit the free IPM Advancement Nonprofit Resource Library at ipmadvancement.com/resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.